Building new construction can definitely be a tricky process, which is why we are starting this YouTube series all about construction lending and how to move forward and the steps you need to take when it comes to building a new construction house here in the Sarasota area. And in this YouTube series, we are going to have a special guest, Manny here, a local construction lender here in Sarasota. So we will be creating a series of episodes talking about the different processes of the construction loan process and also some steps that you should avoid. So in this YouTube video today, we are going to be discussing the top 5 things that everyone needs to avoid when it comes to getting a construction loan. So I will let Manny take it away here talking about the top things to avoid.
Awesome, thank you. I'm super excited to be on here. It's very important to know what you're dealing with when it comes to lending and construction. It can be a different animal in its entirety. So top 5 things that I always recommend to avoid is definitely know your timelines. Whenever you're dealing with construction, you kind of want to know what the length of construction will be, what your lock-in periods are. If you decide to lock in your rate, there's different types of programs out there that can definitely be a huge variable for good or for worse. So also knowing your budgets is super important. You want to avoid running into unforeseen costs, so you want to plan with some contingencies. You also want to make sure that you've done your research on your land. Getting surveys, permits, all that stuff costs. So I would say that's probably your 4th, is doing your due diligence on your land, whether there's going to be some sort of special insurance because you're close to the water, your builder's insurance, risk policies. You want to know that all those things up front, so that's something you want to avoid. I've always recommended is making sure you kind of do your research, which is probably more along the lines for the realtor and builder to do the research on the land. If there's any type of liens, any mechanical liens or anything like that, any unforeseen issues, right, I'd say are probably your top 5 things you want to be cognizant of.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So let's dive into the timeline section of things. And one of the things that I've run into, at least from Josh, my partner, and I building new construction, is obviously the time frames of these construction loans.
Right.
Building new construction here in Sarasota specifically takes a little bit of time to, get the surveys, get the permits. Obviously, we have to do a bunch of little studies and assessments on the land first, before we move forward and start even, digging ground on that specific lot. So would you want to go into a little bit about the timeline about how long a typical construction loan would last?
Absolutely. So obviously they're different, but the typical time frame for a lender is about 12 months. Okay. So we usually like to analyze the project and see what the installments will look like when we're thinking it'll be complete, or at least 60 days out prior to completion, because rate locks typically only last for about 330 days, typically. And that's not the case everywhere. Sometimes you can extend those at fees, obviously. Sometimes you leave the rate floating until you feel you can lock in within an adequate amount of time to finish the house, if that makes sense. Yeah. So definitely knowing how long the construction period will last is critical to the rate lock period.
Gotcha. So yeah, typical building time here in Sarasota is we first have to acquire the lot, which that can take 30 to 45 days, just depending on how long that takes.
Correct.
Then from there, we have to get surveys done and everything like that. And surveys done while you're building a lot, or buying a lot, I should say, that's a lot different than getting an actual survey for your building of the lot. Because there's 2 different surveys. The one that you want, for the most part, a lot of title companies recommend that you just forego that typical survey that they offer, just because it has no purpose for you building. You spend $400 to get that survey when you have to redo it and do another survey for another $600-700. That's more in depth, talking about setbacks and everything like that. Then from there, you really have to figure out, the house design, house plan, and that could take, 30 to 60 days from there. So do you want to talk to us about maybe what is the best time? When is the best time, do you think, when it comes to trying to figure out when is the best time to lock in on a loan? Since you said most of them do last around 330 days. Now that can vary depending on the loan. But do you want to talk about when do you think is the best time to lock in on that loan?
Absolutely. Well, that's a great question. Extremely critical to the process. The suggested practice is always your comfort zone. So if you feel comfortable with your payment at X amount of time, then it's probably advisable to lock in. However, if the uncertainty of I'm not sure if my house is going to be built in time, then you probably want to float it as long as possible. But you do have to be cautious that while you're floating a rate, things can backfire. So suggested practice is always typically whenever it's getting closer to being completed. Typically, most lenders will like to do it within 60 days of completion, and some lenders won't allow it until there's actually a certificate of occupancy.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I think it's really boils down to your comfort zone on how you feel about rates. Which, if you're dealing with a good lender, they'll give you your options and they'll suggest what you should do, and typically we'll go from there. But I always like to try to lock in the rate, obviously at the best time, which is extremely hard to do. That's why you have to deal with a knowledgeable lender. But more importantly, you want to make sure the payment is going to be comfortable for you. So it varies. You can lock in as early as 330 days from prior to completion, or you can float up until 60 days prior to and lock in then. But it really boils down to what the numbers are looking like with the market at that point in time.
What's your payment, what you feel comfortable with,
Correct.
So now that we discussed a little bit of timeline, what a construction loan time frame looks like, what would you say is the second biggest factor or second biggest thing to avoid when getting a construction loan?
I'd say the second biggest thing to avoid is not knowing your budget. Not knowing your budget, it can really backfire because many people will go and have an idea, but then when they maybe go to the design center and then they want to do their finishings, things start to add up. And then some people will get taken by surprise when their designs and their finishings put them over the budget. So I think having a good idea of what your budget, what you can afford prior to going to shop and making these offers and even going to the design center, it's definitely a suggested practice to have a good idea of your costs.
So I think, the budget is probably one of the bigger things too, and the top two things to really look at when you're building a house. Because, when people reach out to me talking about, hey, I'm looking to build a house, well, the first thing I want to ask them really is, well, do you know the price range that you're looking in? Because, I don't want to waste their time, get their hopes up and say, oh yeah, well, we could build you this 4-bed, 3-bath house, 2,600 square foot home. But at the end of the day, they only can afford a $400,000 house. And, if you guys have been looking here in the Sarasota market, you can't build a house for $400,000. That's, over 1,000 square feet realistically. So I think that is something very crucial, is that when you are looking to, before you even get a construction loan, is first see what you can afford and see if it fits what you're looking to do. Because if you're looking to get a 4-bed, 3-bath and a minimum of 2,500 square feet and you cannot go under and you won't go under, but then again, the price range is a little bit too high, then it may just not be in your cards to, do a new construction house right away. Maybe a year or two down the road, it may be possible. But I just feel like that's a huge thing. A lot of people reach out to me and say, well, I want to build a house, but at the end of the day, you got to know your budget.
Got to know your budget. That's extremely critical. Absolutely.
So talking about time frame, knowing your time frame, talking about figuring out your budget, what would you say is the third biggest thing, to look out for?
I'd say the third biggest thing to try to be cautious of is understanding the loan process. If you don't understand that, and your programs, then it can become very stressful. We have one-time closes where it's one closing, and then we also have pretty much 2 closings, but they're different types of loans. So it's critical to know what kind of program you're under, and also not doing things last minute. It's always suggested practice to have your documentation in line, which a good lender will help you get that all in line prior to moving forward.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. If you guys want to know the difference between a one-time close and a 2-time close, you guys can just click this little link up at the top of this video, and we will have another video talking about the differences, the pros and cons of each one, and maybe you guys can decipher which one works best for you. Obviously, you can talk to a lender too in the meantime to figure out what may work best for you, because everyone's situation is different.
Correct.
So it's always best to get something that's specific for your situation and not just a generic situation.
Absolutely.
So what would you say, Manny, is like the fourth, biggest thing to watch out for?
The fourth biggest thing to watch out for is not being in touch and communication with your builder and not knowing timelines. Some people don't really monitor the progress and whatnot, and before you know it, you have a lot of delays due to climate or construction setbacks, supply constraints and whatnot. So I think not staying in constant communication with your lender and your builder throughout the process is something you want to avoid, because things can sneak up on you.
Yep. Yeah. I've seen this, especially during the coronavirus period and everything like that, building delays, construction delays, workers were out because they had COVID, so they had to stay 2 weeks away from everyone. So that put a big strain on the workforce here in Sarasota, and I guess all around the country, realistically. So we're still starting to see those effects, they're easing up a little bit in terms of the supply chain, but our supply chain is still a little wobbly at times depending on the materials, but luckily everything is trending downward now. Except the biggest thing right now is concrete. The biggest shortage that we're dealing with is concrete, and trying to figure out, concrete prices keep rising just because they're in such high demand with these tract home builders all around Sarasota, buying up all the inventory for cement. It leaves, very minimal area for these custom home builders or even these spec builders here in Northport, Sarasota, Venice area, just because these tract home builders are monsters in the area.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's the biggest thing. And I've had people reach out to me about they're building with another builder in Northport, and they're like, they haven't been in communication. The builder hasn't been in communication with them, and they're from halfway across the country. That's the biggest thing, is they're like, well, can you check on the progress? Well, as a real estate agent myself, I'm not going to check on it because I don't have a relationship with that builder, don't want to step on anyone's toes and stuff like that. So, I think it's always good when you're looking to build a house that you vet your builder.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of the main reason why my partner and I, partnered together to be building a house. I'm the real estate agent. He's the GC side of stuff. And coming down from Wisconsin myself, I realized there's a huge gap that needs to be filled with. There's a lot of builders here in Sarasota, don't get me wrong, a lot of good ones, a lot of bad ones. But at the same time, the biggest thing is the lack of communication with all these builders.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what we were here to solve was, being on constant communication, making sure that we're doing video calls with the clients and stuff like that through the construction build. Even if they're halfway across the country, they still feel like they're, in person looking at their house and stuff like that. So you did bring up a good tip about making sure your builder is good on communication and making sure that you read the reviews of the builder. Absolutely.
And to elaborate a little more on your point, when you say vet the builder, I'd say my fifth one to avoid is not vetting your lender. It's very important to vet the lender because we have several different products within the same realm, but they cater to a broad audience. So it's critical that your lender understands your wants and needs, more importantly your needs, and obviously meet those needs.
Yeah, because I know at least here in Sarasota that not every lender will do a construction loan because new construction loans are a lot different than your typical end loan to the end user, buying a pre-existing house and stuff like that. So there are a select few lenders here in Sarasota and the general, Sarasota County area that do construction loans. So it's always good to, figure out which ones do those and which ones don't. And of course, you do the construction loans.
We can do construction and perm loans, which is the beauty of a construction and perm, where you can actually buy the lot as dirt and then build custom from that point on. So that would be considered your CP loan. Some people are under the impression that a house that is not fully finished would still qualify under a CP loan. And the differentiating factor there is if a home is within 60 days of completion, that doesn't fall under a construction loan. That falls under an end loan. And many people think because the house is still under construction, that falls under a construction loan. And that's definitely not the case.
Yeah, because my partner and I were building 4 houses in Osprey, as you know, and those are about 30 days to completion right now. So those would be an end loan and not a construction loan. Construction loan is basically when you're looking to buy dirt and build a house yourself and not buy a house that's, currently under construction with the builder. You wouldn't need a construction loan at that point because the loan closes when the house is finished.
And that's referred to as an end loan. And a lot easier than a construction loan. It's just another traditional mortgage with a fancy name as an end loan. That's all.
If you guys want to know the difference between an end loan and a construction loan, we'll also be doing another video on that as well. So just click this card up above at the top of this video, and you guys can check out the differences between the two. But I feel like that just sums up, the top 5 things to avoid when doing a construction loan. So I thank you very much, Manny, for hopping on this episode. And if you guys want to see more about getting a construction loan, how to get a construction loan, steps, pros and cons of building new construction construction versus pre-existing. We'll be doing a whole, YouTube series on that. So if you guys are interested, make sure you guys follow up for the next upcoming weeks, where we will be posting, 1 or 2 videos every single week on this exact topic. So once again, Manny, thank you very much. And if you guys are looking to move to the Sarasota area, don't forget that we do have our buyer's relocation guide. As you know, I came from Wisconsin myself, so the biggest thing that I saw was that, I didn't have a lot of my questions answered because there was not a lot of information. So I want to make sure that you guys have all your information covered. So if you guys want that buyer's relocation guide that talks about, the best places to eat, the best places to stay, top 10 things to do in Sarasota or even Northport, just go and check out those 2 relocation guides down below. But once again, thank you very much, Manny, for hopping on, and we will catch you guys all on the next video.